Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Victory Loves Company podcast. And today we're going to talk about absolutely nothing. This is a segment that I would like to call Conny's Convos, because every now and again some people just like to turn off their brain and get away from the hustle and bustle of their everyday life and just listen to absolute nonsense. So here we are. I want to thank everybody for listening and supporting the podcast up until this particular point. I know for myself it's been a journey, as I am new to podcasting, and I truly am enjoying it. I really am. And it's it's a labor of love. You know, it's something that I enjoy doing in between work, whenever the 5 hours a week that I'm not working are, to explain some information to you that might be relevant. But I totally understand why women watch reality shows, because they just enjoy, I guess, seeing drama that doesn't involve them. And you know what? I can't say that I blame them, because we all have our little vices. I personally, I like to watch old game shows. I know on my cable, it's a Sling, so technically digital, we have the Game Show Network, and there are a lot of old shows on there that I used to watch when I was a kid. Now, I'm not really that old, but I used to enjoy the older television shows like Wheel of Fortune and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I still remember when that came out. I thought that was such a great show. And I was watching one particular show, and it was with I guess it's the third host, Chris Garrison. They film in Connecticut now. I know they used to film in New York. Regis, of course, was the first host of it, and then Meredith, something or other, she ended up being the second hostess, which I wasn't really too crazy of. But what I noticed watching these things is that they tinkered with the show way too much. I think it came out in like 1997, 1999, something like that. So the availability of the internet wasn't really mainstream. It was available, but not everybody had it. But I noticed, like, kind of going forward with like the creation of the show and the evolution of it, is they started to get like more technical. Like when you watch a show today, at the end of it, they were always like, all right, be sure to follow us here, subscribe there, tweet us over here, do this and that. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm watching a show, so I don't have to do anything. And I just feel that with these shows that are on television, it's like work. Like, no, I'm not going to pick up my phone. I'm not going to tweet. I'm watching television now, so piss off. So I started noticing that with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, like right around 2001, 2002, while Regis was still hosting it. And it was kind of like, if you want to play along, sign on to abc.com/millionaire and play along. It's like, no, not going to do that. So anyway, I synced my phone to my television, so I'm able to watch YouTube videos like right on my television that I have on my wall. And I'm watching all the older episodes of everybody knows the one with John Carpenter, who was the first one to win $1 million back in, I think that was November of 2000. If I remember when Regis held the check up, I think it was November of 2000. And just like a sport, like a stud, answered every single question without using a lifeline. And he was the IRS agent from Connecticut, I believe, answering all these questions without hesitation until he got to the very end, which has to be one of the most cinematic moments in game show history, when he gets to the question, the $1 million question, and he's like, yeah, I want to use one of my lifelines. And he ends up calling his dad. And Regis is like, hey, this is Regis. I'm calling from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We have your son, John, here, and he needs your help. He's like, you have 30 seconds. Your time starts right now. So John, the contestant, is all like, hey, Dad, it's me. Don't need your help. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to win $1 million. And then you just hear everybody in the background just go absolutely crazy. And you see like the look on Regis like, oh, well, all right, I guess this is happening. So it was really, really cinematic. It was cool to see. And the question was like, it was something that it's like you knew it or you didn't. There was really no like logic around it. I think the question was something like, who was like the first president to appear on Laugh-In, which was a TV show back in the day, and all the answers were like presidents that were like right next to each other. It was like Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, came after Nixon, Ford, and Carter. And the answer, I think, was like Lyndon Johnson, and the guy wins it, and everybody goes berserk. His wife comes down. It was really, really cool. So I think there was one other guy that won it while Regis was hosting when his tenure there on ABC before Meredith took over. And this guy, his name was like Richard Smith or something. He had it was a simple name. And this guy looked like a retired Santa Claus. He had like the beard, he had the receding hairline, but like because of the beard and because of the way he was dressed, he just looked like a super, super humble guy. Like a really, really, like very approachable. The beard made him approachable, right? So he's barreling through these questions. And if you know anything about the show, you're allowed, at the time, you're allowed 3 lifelines. You can ask the audience. You can do a 50-50 where they take away 2 wrong answers. And then you can phone a friend. Out of the newer show, with Chris Garrison, you can't phone anybody. It's like whoever the guest that you bring on the show is like they call it a +1, so they don't really call it a phone a friend anymore. So anyway, back to Richard Smith, is he's doing really, really well. You know, he's a retired truck driver, and he barrels through the first like 7 or 8 questions. So now he's at like $64,000, and he finally had to pull the audience. And he's like, yeah, you know, that's kind of the direction I was leaning in. And the audience gave him like a 64% confidence in it. And he's like, yeah, all right, I'll go with C. Gets the answer right. Goes on to the next question. Blows through that. Then gets to the $250,000 question. And it was something like, which of these agencies has this phrase in their hallway? And it was like in like ye something or other, the truth shall set you free. And the choices were like the CIA, the FBI, the Board of Education, or the Library of Congress. So my first reaction was Library of Congress, because of the books, knowledge, and knowledge will set you free, whatever. You know, it's just my deductive reasoning, the idiot that I am, right? So the contestant didn't know the answer. So he calls in his lifeline, and it was like some doctor, you know, and I've Meredith is like, oh, okay, so who are we calling today? He's like, oh, I want to call, you know, Dr. Johnson or whatever like that. And who's Dr. Johnson? You know, he's a very good friend of mine, very smart. I think he can help me out with this question. All right, our friends at AT&T will get us the doctor on the phone, and here we go. Ring, 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 ring. So the guy gets on, and she's all like, okay, we have your friend here, and he's going for $250,000. He's already won $125,000. So the guy's like, all right. He's like, lay it on me. So he's like, all right, she's like, okay, you have 30 seconds, and they start right now. And he gets on, and he reads the question really fast, and then he reads it again without having the guy respond. So he's like, which one is it? Library of Congress, CIA, FBI, or Board of Ed? He's like, 10 seconds. He's like, I'm really not, on the phone, the guy's like, I'm really not sure, but I think it's, he's like, I think it's Library of Congress. He's like, well, how confident are you? 3 seconds. He's like, 80%. And then they got disconnected. So Mr. Smith is kind of just sitting there, like staring at the question. And Meredith is like, well, what were you thinking? And he's like, well, He's like, Library of Congress makes sense. And I'm like screaming at the television, like, yeah, that does make sense. Just go with it. I never seen the episode before. And he's staring at it. He's like, I think it's CIA. He's like, and I don't know why. And prior to the commercial he was boasting about when he was preparing for the show, he brought along like 4 suitcases full of like encyclopedias. And it helped him gain knowledge to get him basically to where he was. And obviously it paid off. The guy already won 125 grand. I mean, that could put a dent in anybody's finances. I don't care what income bracket you're currently boasting in. But anyway, so this guy was 80% sure, his lifeline was 80% sure that the answer was Board of Ed. And he's like, I don't think that's it, man. And this guy could have walked away with $125,000. But what does this guy do? He goes, no. He goes, I think it's CIA. And Meredith is like, all right. So, boom, CIA, final answer. Goes against his lifeline's 80% confidence, right? So Meredith is like, oh, Richard, I don't know why you did that. And I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, why did he do that? And she's like, you're right. And everybody just goes berserk. And the guy's just like sitting there all like humble, like barely breaking a smile, like, yeah, I got this. I knew it. And it was really, really funny because like Meredith was almost like on the verge of tears because he's a sweet guy. This guy won 250 grand. Now, I don't, look, as a business owner and as being in business, you take risks. But if I was guaranteed $125,000 retired, okay, guaranteed that, I would not be taking a risk on it. But evidently this guy felt confident enough to take the risk, and you know what, I applaud him for that. And it was really, really cool. So what happens later? He goes on to the $500,000 question, knows the answer, and then of course they take a commercial break, and they come back, and they're like, all right, well, Richard Smith is now going for $1 million. And she's like, I have to let you know, this is the first time anyone's ever won it on syndicated, on a program that it was syndicated on. So I guess that was just their fancy way of saying this is the first time anyone's won it while I've been hosting it and while the man, Regis, is not here to do it for me. But anyway, she's like, all right, here we go. So the $1 million question pops up. And before Meredith has a chance to finish it, you could see the reaction on Mr. Smith's face that he knew the answer, and it was really funny. So the question was that Uncle Sam was based off of like an 1824 character of whatever the question was. Who was what was Uncle Sam's occupation? And it was like a weapons manufacturer, a meat inspector, a mailman, and like, a painter or something like that. And he's staring at the question, and Meredith's like, well, do you think you know it? He goes, yes, ma'am. He goes, I do. He's like, I just want to make sure that I'm reading it correctly. He goes, because there were a whiles back, this is the contestant talking. He's like, a whiles back, he's like, there was a Asian gentleman sitting right there, and the question was read, and the answer was the nectarine, but the contestant read it as tangerine. And he's like, we all read it. We just read it like this. And he's like, he got it wrong, and everybody, knew that they got it wrong, but they misread it or something like that. It was something along the lines of the way we just read the question, but he thought he said tangerine and not nectarine, or the other way around, whatever it comes out to be. So Mr. Smith is telling Meredith, he's like, I'm not trying to milk the moment here. He's like, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So she's like, do you want me to read it again? Yeah, sure. She's like, okay, Uncle Sam was blah, 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 blah. Which one is it? Is it meat inspector or weapons manufacturer, painter, or mailman? So he takes a deep breath, and he's just like, yeah, meat inspector. Final answer. And she's like, I'm so happy. And he ends up winning $1 million. It was really cool. I mean, it was a really, really sweet old man, like very humble, thanking his mother on like television, on being like what a great mom she was, and that his father passed away, and he was a big fan of life, and he would have been, proud to see his his boy win this $1 million and all this other nonsense. So it was really, really cool. So that's what I've been watching. I was watching an episode last night, and this was actually on television. It wasn't YouTube. It was live, I guess, or whatever it is. I need to record it. It was the most up to date. It was the one with Chris Garrison hosting. I have no idea who the guy is, but he seems to be doing a good job at hosting. But I just feel like his sincerity is like not sincere, if that makes any kind of sense. Like almost like too phony. I realize that he's in show business and he has to be phony, but the fact that it's kind of like blatantly obvious. But I don't know. There he is hosting a show, and here I am doing a podcast. So what do I really know? Nothing. So they had excuse me. So they had on yesterday. It was like Champions Week or something. It was basically people that went for it in the past and like missed. So if you got high up in the show during the Regis and Meredith days, the first threshold was like $1,000 and the second one was $32,000. So if you got high enough, you can get a free shot at a question, but the worst you could leave, or the least amount you could leave with would be $32,000. So there's a bunch of people that came on the show, I guess went for these really high value questions and ended up missing them. So this episode, the first thing they did was they have the contestant come back on. They make a couple witty jokes to get familiar with each other, establish credibility, blah, 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 blah. And they post the question that they went for and missed. And, if that was me, I would be like, you know what, I don't want to look at this anymore. I just want to move forward with this show and win my money back here, because clearly I lost a lot last time around. So there was one particular question that I actually thought was very interesting. The guy got it wrong. The question was, and I'll paraphrase it, it was like branded as lazy songwriting. Which song features the word nah, N-A, 63 times without interruption? The choices were Hey Jude, Centerfold, Welcome to the Jungle, or Getting Jiggy with It. So I'm familiar with all of the questions, and this guy had to have been probably in his late 40s. So he had to have been familiar with at least 3 out of the 4. But I think, again, it's one of those questions. It's like you know it or you don't. So when you think about it, okay, which of these songs has the word nah 63 times in it? So the guy went with A, which was Hey Jude, because he started singing it like nah, 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 nah. I'm tone deaf, by the way. So he went with A, and he ended up getting the question wrong. And the correct answer was B. It was Centerfold by Jay Giles Band. And I'm like, holy crap. I said, yeah, that's right. I said, that is so misleading. This had to have been like a $250,000 question, because everybody knows, the famous na 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 by Hey Jude, but it wasn't 63 times interrupted. I'm sure they said it 63 times, but it wasn't interrupted, because Paul McCartney says, Jude a bunch of times in there. So anyway, the answer was Centerfold by Jay Giles Band, and the guy didn't know the song. So I guess that, definitely played a contributing factor to his decision making, because again, if you don't know the other songs, that's really what you would kind of gravitate towards. Welcome to the Jungle, I don't even think they say nah. I could be wrong. By Guns N' Roses, I thought they say please, but they say like the P like a bunch of times, like please, please, something like that. And they getting jiggy with it is nah 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 nah, getting jiggy with it. So again, there was an interruption in there, but I don't think the guy really knew that song that well, which is why he went with Hey Jude. But that being said, the answer was Centerfold, and I even knew the exact part because I'm a fan of the song. I like a bunch of songs by them, and then I started singing it out loud, and it was like, "Angel is centerfold, na 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 na." And I'm like, all right, that definitely has to be 63. So the answer ended up being 63. I just thought it was an interesting question because the answers could have been anything. And again, if you didn't know it, but I don't blame this guy for doing what he did. But yeah, that was that. I thought it was interesting. I know like some of the beginner questions, excuse me, like the $100 question, $500 question, $1,000 question, they're all like nonsensical. And I think the reason for that is because when the show came out, they wanted to appeal to like kids too, because parents watched the show. And I don't think a 10-year-old is going to know the answer to a $64,000 question, although I have been wrong before. And so like the first like 5 questions are always like nonsensical, like, like if you're using a sledgehammer, like odds are, what is your occupation? And it'll be like, like a pilot, a knitter, a painter, or like, a blacksmith, you know what I mean? So they have questions like that. But what I've also noticed is what makes a question hard is it's 2 things, broken down into 2 things. It's how close are the answers to each other, that it could be anything, and how much information are they giving you in the question itself. So again, if it's like, which of these tools would a painter use? And like the question, and the answer would be like, a 5-inch brush, a 10-inch brush, a 20-inch brush, so it depends on what the answer is. And then also the information that they give to you, like in it, it's like, which of these insects shorted out a computer, coining the term computer bug? And then the answers would be like moth, butterfly, beetle, or like an ant. So it's like you can kind of figure out, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. But if the question read something like, which of the following shorted out an early version of a supercomputer that inspired the term computer bug, and they give you like answers like a computer virus, a moth, a flood, and something else, stupid, you might have a hard time kind of reasoning what the answer is. But given like the little bit of information that they give you in the question itself, you can kind of figure it out. Hopefully that makes sense. I think that was a bad example, but you get the idea if you watch the show. But trivia, I seem to enjoy. I seem to have a somewhat unlimited knowledge of useless information that really doesn't apply to anywhere except for maybe a good conversation amongst strangers, or if you're at a bar or trying to make small talk with somebody. But the big introvert that I am, I honestly couldn't care less. So that being said, there's too much fun to be lost from useless knowledge. So that's why I watch it. That's why I do what I do. And that's pretty much it. So yeah. Over the week, I was playing a gig at one of the community colleges. They had 2 campuses, one in Jersey City and one in Union City. And they were at the same exact time on the same date. I took one. I had my driver take the other. And we were setting up chocolate fountains for the school. And we provided them with the dipping items. I think they wanted like strawberries, they wanted marshmallows, cookies, pound cake, something else for like 150 people. And my driver was doing the same one a couple towns over, and his was for like 100 people. So when I take these gigs, I don't brand myself as a caterer, okay? The point of the setups and the machines that I offer, it's not, the purpose of it is not to get you full. It's just kind of like a little treat. Like you dip a marshmallow into the fountain, everybody smiles, everybody laughs, yada, yada, yada. And people go on their merry way. Seeing people happy is one of the, is truly one of the perks of the job and the fruits of my labor, pun intended. And even though my event had more guests in it, I had more than enough dipping items to go around. I think I had to replenish like the pretzels like once, the marshmallows like once, but like 20 minutes into it, my partner shoots me a text message. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "give me a call when you get a chance." He's like, "I'm running low on dipping items." I'm like, looking at the time. I'm like, it's only been 20 minutes. I'm like, your party is got like 35% less of what I'm doing. I'm like, how are you running low? So I ended up finishing my set early. So luckily enough, my client said, you know what, we're kind of done here. You can get going. She hired me for 2 hours. I was done in like an hour and like 10 minutes. Thank God. Nothing brings me more happiness than finishing a job early. So I was able to get out of there early. And what I did is where he was kind of on my way back to the office. So I ended up having to take the leftover dipping items that were unused, of course. All right, we want to keep sanitation here as a priority, right? And I ended up having to hand deliver it to my driver, the campus that was a couple towns over. So it ended up making my client happy, but I know that I definitely gauged how much to bring properly. I think the problem was that my client told the students to basically take as much as you want, as many as you want, and that's why he blew through it very quickly. So like I said earlier, I don't brand myself as a caterer. Some people say, listen, Conrad, whenever you're done, you're done. That's it. You're really being featured for the dessert portion of our party, and whenever you're out, just pack up and just leave. And then you get the sticklers that are like, you know what? I hired you for 2 hours, and God damn it, you're going to stay here for 2 hours no matter what. Even though nobody's dipping, nobody wants anything, you're still there. But, I don't like to talk smack about my clients. They do pay the bills after all. And I do have the privilege of working with like some really cool people, both professionals and non-professionals too. But even when I go to halls or hotels or schools or whatever like that, the staff they're always very hospitable towards me and my team. So I really can't say anything bad about them. So that was pretty much my week. And then I created a couple of videos through this app that I got. I recently bought a GoPro. I know I'm a little late to the game, but I think they're really cool. And what I'm trying to do is to capture more video footage of people actually using the machine. So if we're doing ice cream, or if we're doing cotton candy, which are 2 items that I offer, set up the GoPro where it's like aimed at the people, and I would do a time-lapse video on it. So I can encompass serving like 150 people over the course of like an hour, and I can shrink that down to like 15 seconds. And then I could add some, funky music to it, a little introduction with my logo on it, and just make a video out of it. I know Instagram limits it to like a minute, so I try to do that. But the app is really cool. So whenever it is I'm not working or preparing for a gig, I'm always trying to keep my web presence relevant by way of social media. Since I'm a very visual industry, or service rather, Instagram and YouTube are my friends. So I do my best to kind of create content around those platforms, as I find that works very well for me. And some of the YouTube links are in the website itself, which is good marketing because my web designer says it's a double whammy, excuse me. People visiting the website get to take a look at the video directly on the website, and since it's through YouTube, you actually get to increase your YouTube view count. So I guess that's the double whammy right there. But I take for granted a lot of times that people know what some of these items are, like a chocolate fountain, for example. I know that kind of really says it all, chocolate fountain, but it goes by so many different names, just like moon bounces or moon walks or bounce houses. See, I just did it right there. They go by so many different names out here. I don't know what the correct terminology is. You know, you could say those, inflatable things that the kids are jumping up and down that they're always breaking their necks on it. So, but out here in this area in New Jersey and New York, it is, it's brutal, man. It is brutal. Like, to buy an inflatable, which I think is the correct term, but that's not how people search for it. They'll search like bounce house, moonwalk, bouncy castle, fun things to jump in. It's ridiculous what people will search for the easiest things. But I guess I'm in the industry, it makes it, I make it seem like it's easy, but I guess the people have never done it before, it's not, which I totally understand. So anyway, I know in New Jersey, it's like super, super strict. Like you can, how does it work? Because I know I wanted to do it because it's very, very lucrative out here. There's a lot of companies that do it, but there's plenty of cash to go around for it. But the problem is you can only buy certain inflatables from like state approved distributors, and you can only have state approved insurance for them. Okay. And it's, to me, it was just like a big turnoff. And the newspapers without fail always report, regardless of what state you live in, that there were a bunch of kids in this thing. The wind picked up a little bit, it wasn't nailed down properly, and the whole damn thing just flew away. So it's things like that people get really, really nervous for. Again, I know New Jersey is like really bad with it. New York is very strict with it as well. I think to the point where you actually need an attendant or a staff member to stay there for it. So as convenient as it is to just simply drop off the machine and then pick it up like 3 or 4 hours later and just like make an easy $200, I don't think it works like that anymore. I think you have to actually stay with it. But even regardless, you have to make your clients sign a rental agreement, basically saying like, yeah, you know what, like we went over all the safety precautions with you, and if your kid snaps your neck, it's not our problem, and you can't come after us. Or people sign it because they're just like, all right, whatever, getting back to the party. But contract or not, that's not going to stop anybody from still suing your ass. So the piece of paper is pretty much garbage. But I talked myself out of that I don't know how many times, and yeah, I just refuse to do it. So I don't include it as part of my rental. And I think I went totally off track of the point I was trying to make here. I was talking about a GoPro, wasn't I? So anyway, I bought the GoPro and captured some really cool videos of people using it. And again, it doesn't always have to be a time lapse thing where you can serve 150 people in an hour and just kind of squeeze that down to like 15 seconds. But when you're dealing with kids, because I do a lot of kid events, like for schools, I do a lot of bar and bat mitzvahs and sweet 16. So there's a lot of minors there, and the parents sometimes can be a little anal about having their kids featured on like a website or a YouTube video. So I always try to clear it with the parents prior to it. I just say, hey, listen, I'm just doing this for promotional purposes. I'm not a creep, and that's basically it. And for the most part, everybody's cool with it, but I did have the occasional parent that came up to me while I was actually filming, and they're just like, hey, would you mind turning that off? It's making the parents and the kids uncomfortable. So I'm not going to argue with them. I'll just turn it off. And that's exactly what I did. So I turned it off, and I think that was the one and only time that somebody had a problem with it. But I highly recommend something like that. It's a good promotional thing, especially if you're in like a visual industry. Even like DJs, I work with a lot of DJs. I work with a lot of photographers. I work with a lot of jugglers. I work with a lot of balloon artists, things like that. Face painting. These are all things that contribute to a party regardless of how large or how small it is. But if you're doing a corporate event, odds are they're probably not going to have face painters there. But they will have treats to kind of like hand out to their employees, like whether it's Valentine's Day and you want to do chocolate, if it's Cinco de Mayo and I want to have a margarita machine, again, something that I offer, that would be more common to see something like that crop up. And again, I'm more than happy to do it. So, that was the point I was trying to make. Not everybody knows what these machines are. So, all right, so like I was saying, a chocolate fountain, as the name implies, excuse me, it looks like a it looks like a fountain. It looks like a little mini water fountain, and you put the chocolate in the base of it. That's melted. You turn it on. There's a little it's called an auger. It's the correct term for it, but it's really like it's just like a thing that like elevates it, and it pushes up over the top, and then the gravity just lets it drop down. Hence the waterfall effect. So again, people will call it by a bunch of different names. They'll call it like a chocolate fondue fountain. They'll call it a chocolate volcano. They'll call it a chocolate waterfall. I think those are kind of like the main ones. Like I said, getting back to the inflatable things, there's this, they go by so many different names. So you have to cater to, what these people are going to be looking for, regardless if you agree with the terminology or not. So there's another item that I offer there. It's called a churro warmer or churro warmer. CHURRO. And for those who don't know what it is, it's also known as a Spanish donut. And I've never heard of that term until I actually started offering it with my machines. Essentially, if you've been to like a carnival or kind of an outdoor festival, a churro, actually, you know what? They sell them at Costco. They're like $1. And they are a cinnamon and sugar coated 10-inch piece of like dough that have like a little filling on the inside, and they taste absolutely phenomenal. But again, there are people out there that don't know what the hell that is, so they have to go strictly visual, be like, oh, you know what, yeah, I do know what it is, because a lot of times people will they'll know what the item is by looking at it, but they won't know the official name for it. So again, getting back to the GoPro, you can take, videos and photos and whatnot of people, taking these things out of the machine and eating them and enjoying them. So it's really a cool thing to do. I mean, I really do, love it. I mean, I know I complain about my clients every now and again, the pain in the ass mom or the micromanager or whatever. It's just the nature of the business. It's the price of living in the fast lane. Again, I really am in no position to complain. I mean, I love what I do. I work my ass off to build the client list that I have and have the prestige of working with these really, really big companies. I think in my introduction I mentioned that I worked with Google. They wanted like 4 ice cream machines or 5 ice cream machines for a corporate thing that they were doing. I hit Apple in downtown Manhattan. That was a cool thing. I did Tumblr when they were premiering Orange is the New Black season 2, which is a great show, by the way. And I think they wanted I think that was a very simple gig. I think they wanted just like a popcorn cart with their branded bags. So they gave us the bags. I had my guy there. He made the popcorn fresh on site and ended up just scooping it into the bags and kind of handing it out. And they showed the pilot episode from the second season. And I've never seen, up until that point, an episode of Orange before. And when I saw it, I was immediately hooked. But it was the first episode of the second season, so I already kind of knew who was going to live and who didn't live. So when I went home to watch it on Netflix, I'm trying to establish, I'm like, all right, well, obviously this person's going to live. So it ruined it for me a little bit. But what season are they up to right now? 4 or 5 or whatever it is. I know the new ones come out in June. It's just a great show. My girl and I watch it. We binge watch it, and it's just an overall great show. And yeah, it was really cool. So, but that's just the nature of the business. You know, you win some, you lose some. You just have those days that you're just really, you know, you take two steps back to take one step forward, and then you get the surprise. You know, when your client gets to tell you, hey, you know what, we're done here. Why don't you go home? And you get to beat traffic. You get to come home early, take a hot bath, and just kind of veg out, you know, clean everything, and just prepare it for the next time around. So, yeah. But, you know, people that don't know you or people that don't own businesses, I find that they're very quick to judge like what you do without actually having to do it. Like I'll give you an example. Most of my work, I say most, maybe like 60%. 60% of my work falls on the weekend. So if I'm not doing a wedding, if I'm not doing a bar bat mitzvah, if I'm not doing a sweet 16, you know, something like that, I'm working during the week doing corporate events, which I love doing corporate events because you work with professionals and it's usually during the day. It's not at night, okay? But for people that don't know you, so from my neighbor's perspective, it looks like that I'm always home. I'm perpetually in my pajamas because, you know, that's my uniform when I'm not out on a road, you know, or setting something up or, you know, buying fruit or whatever it is that I have to buy supplies for a gig that I'm doing. And anyways, so from my neighbor's perspective, I just look like this disheveled, unemployed guy that's home all day, sleeps late, and really doesn't do anything. But, you know, the fact of the matter is when everybody's eating dinner or everybody's inside or when everyone's making the commute home is when I'm just kind of getting ready to do my thing. And the joke it's not really a joke, but the catchphrase I always say to people is that I'm always one meal behind everybody. So by the time I wake up, people had already have ate breakfast. So by the time I'm ready to have breakfast, people are eating lunch. By the time I'm ready to have lunch, people are eating dinner. So I usually have my lunches like around like 5 o'clock. And then I have my dinner later in the evening when people are kind of settling down to kind of, you know, get ready for bed. So that's what my schedule consists of, but I could totally see from an outsider's point of view how like, oh, it doesn't look that hard, or like, oh, the hours are flexible. It's like, no, it's not. You know, I call it the iceberg effect. It's like you only get to see this much, but they don't get to see the hard work. They don't see the sleepless nights. They don't see the sacrifice. They don't see the panic attacks that you have. You know, they don't see any of that. You know, they don't see the part where, you know, you're getting yelled at on the phone. They don't see the part of you being inconvenienced, you know, for one reason or another, because sometimes that's, you know, all it seems. And then you have to juggle your personal life in there too. Now, I don't have any kids. My girl and I have decided not because we don't have anything against kids. I actually love kids. I have 4 nieces and nephews, and a lot of my friends have kids. And I'd rather be the fun aunt and uncle than the parent who had a child because of social norms or pressure from in-laws or parents or whoever that are from a different generation, as I am a millennial and our parents are from the Generation X or the baby boomer generation. So a lot of people that age really don't understand. Well, it's like, well, after you get married, the next step is to have kids. It's like, no, it's not. It's to make sure that you're happy. And there was a quote by the great Heath Ledger, who played one of the most iconic bad guys in cinema history, in my opinion, when he played the Joker in The Dark Knight in 2008. And the quote was something along the lines of, you know, people will ask you, are you married? Do you have kids? Do you own a home? As if it's a grocery list. But nobody stops to ask you, are you happy? And I thought that quote was actually like really cool. He was a father, I believe. He passed. I remember when he died. He was 28 years old, and it was a couple months before the movie actually came out. It was in January. That's right. It wasn't too far from my birthday because I'm an Aquarius. He was right. He was absolutely right. Nobody stops to ask, are you happy? They're just like, okay, well, this is what I did. So therefore, is this something that you did? So they can, I don't know, somehow relate to you? I don't know. But all I know is that, we mutually decided that having children, wasn't for us, which I think is a very mature thing to admit to yourself or to admit to your partner, because for a lot of people, that's a make or break situation. Like if you want to have a kid and maybe your partner doesn't, or vice versa, that can certainly put a strain on your relationship. Well, I'll save that part for another episode, but you get the point. You get the idea. So we decided not to. And, like I said, all my other friends have decided to just crank out kids. 2 out of 4 of my groomsmen had their kids, one in November and one in December. And it's like on top of my one neighbor who had their first kid about a year ago. There's no shortage of boys and girls that we're going to be able to spoil, now and when they get older. So that's something that my girl and I look forward to. So, that's it. I'll end it there. Hopefully the Heath Ledger quote was strong enough to go out on, but of course I had to ramble like an idiot. But that's it. That's the podcast. Thank you for listening. Again, my name is Conrad Agdarian, and you are listening to Victory Loves Company, the Conny's Convos edition. Please feel free to reach out to us on our Facebook and our Twitter pages, which is at VLC Podcast. If you have any suggestions or questions that you would like me to ask, our email address is thevictorypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.